You know, in the history of any great dog breed, there are the names everybody knows, the big ones. But then there are the quiet architects, the people working behind the scenes whose influence is absolutely massive, but whose stories, for whatever reason, kind of get lost to time. Well, today we're finding one.
So, who was this guy? This quiet architect of the American Pit Bull Terrier. For years, his name has been little more than a footnote, but his impact? It's literally written into the DNA of some of the most famous dogs in the world. So, let's start our own little historical investigation and see what we can uncover.
His name was Con Feeley, and using old documents, historical records, and something called pedigree logic, we are going to piece his story back together. We're going to give this forgotten founder his proper place in the history books.
Okay, let's get started. First up, we need to establish the case file on this forgotten founder. We're going to begin with just the hard documented facts that we know for sure. Right off the bat, looking at the record, it's so clear Feeley wasn't just some hobbyist. I mean, get this. He co-founded the ADBA in 1909, the main registry for the breed. He was a super influential early breeder, and he was tight with the legendary John P. Colby. This means he is literally baked into both the institutional and the genetic foundation of the modern APBT. He was there at the beginning. Now, to really get a grip on Feeley's true impact, we've got to correct the record on something really important. We have to crack this historical code about what the term Irish blood actually means. This is key. And here it is. This is the one detail that honestly changes everything. For decades, people just assumed Irish blood meant, a dog that was born in Ireland. Simple enough. But that's wrong. The term actually refers to a specific fighting strain that was developed in England by Irish immigrants. So the heritage is Irish, the people were Irish, but the dog's birthplace was English. And that is a critical distinction. So we have to completely shift our thinking here. We're moving away from a simple, kind of lazy geographical assumption, a dog born in Ireland, to a much more precise historical fact, a specific strain's heritage. Trust me, getting this right is the key that unlocks the rest of Con Feeley's entire story. All right, so now that we've cracked that code, we can start tracing the bloodline for real. This is where we connect the dots and find the hard evidence that links Con Feeley directly to this very specific Irish strain. So, how do we make that connection? Well, you follow the paper trail. Old pedigrees for Feeley's own dogs, like one named Jessie, show a direct line right back to the famous Lloyd's Pilot. And who was Lloyd's Pilot? He was the cornerstone dog, the key animal from that English-bred Irish immigrant strain we just talked about. This is the smoking gun. It's documented proof that Feeley was working with this exact important bloodline. And if you thought that was direct evidence, check this out. This quote from a historical article on the famous Old Family Red Nose, or OFRN line, it's stunning. It explicitly names two men as the originators of that whole family, William Lightner and Con Feeley. He wasn't just around these dogs, he's on the record as one of the two guys who started it all. So we've established the facts, we know who he was and what blood he worked with. Now we can follow the genetic trail and see just where his influence went. We're going to follow his legacy in blood. Okay, now it's really important to be clear about what we're doing here. We are moving from hard, documented facts to what you'd call historical inference, but it's based on pedigree logic. This is exactly how serious dogmen have traced the history of their bloodlines for more than 100 years. It's solid stuff. So let's start by laying out the puzzle pieces that connect Feeley to the legendary breeder Joe Corvino. Fact number 1, we have documented proof that Feeley was breeding dogs with Lloyd's Pilot blood. Fact number 2, we also have historical records showing that Corvino's entire famous yard was built on that exact same pilot-connected foundation. When you put those two pieces together, the logical conclusion is it's really hard to ignore. It becomes a very strong, historically sound inference that Feeley's specific strain is one of the primary roots of the entire Corvino family of dogs. The genetic ingredients are a perfect match. And we see the exact same pattern when we look at the Boudreaux line. That family is heavily built on the influence of one particular dog, Tudor's Debo. And guess what happens when you trace Debo's ancestry? It goes right back to the same pilot and Irish-type stock that Feeley mastered. It creates this indirect, but absolutely undeniable genetic link.
You can practically see the whole genetic highway laid out right here. It starts with that original Irish immigrant strain over in England. It flows through the key dog, Lloyd's Pilot, and is then concentrated and perfected by Feeley and Leitner. That work forms the very basis of the OFRN and Corvino lines, which in turn flow directly into famous modern families like Norrod's Ironline. It's a straight line.
So, let's put it all together. Let's really assess the final impact of this quiet architect. What is the final verdict on Con Feeley's legacy?
When you really step back and look at the whole picture, you see that Feeley's massive impact splits into two powerful legacies. On one hand, you've got his institutional legacy as a co-founder of the ADBA, literally helping build the entire community from the ground up. And at the exact same time, he has this profound genetic legacy as a key breeder of the Irish strain, a named founder of the entire OFRN family, and a foundational influence on the Corvino, Boudreaux, and Norrod lines. It's just incredible. So the conclusion here is really inescapable. He wasn't a footnote. He wasn't just some minor player who happened to be around. Con Feeley was one of the quiet, essential architects behind many of today's most famous and respected American Pit Bull Terriers. Period. And, that really leaves us with one final thought. In any field, in any history, how many other figures like Con Feeley are out there? How many other quiet architects are just waiting to be rediscovered in the histories we think we already know so well? Makes you wonder, doesn't it?